Hello and welcome to this installment of the four-part 2013 NISA Center Ramadan Dialogues. My name is Will Goodyear. I'm a research associate here at the center, and I am joined today by Ambassador James LaRocco, director of the center. As always with the NISA Center, I'd like to reiterate that the views expressed in this film do not represent those of the United States government, the Department of Defense, or the National Defense University. Ambassador LaRocco, 2012 and 2013 have been challenging years for much of North Africa. Even today, July 1st, 2013, Egypt is undergoing the largest mass political demonstration in the history of mankind. Libya has been suffering from internal conflict, one result of which was the June deaths of 29 in Benghazi. Algeria faced a number of terrorist attacks and an ongoing leadership crisis. In somewhat brighter news, Mali received the help it needed from France and other outside forces to roll back the extremists who had split the country, resulting in hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing to neighboring countries. What, in your view, will the end of 2013 bring for these Arab Spring countries? Will it be a summer of promise or one of even more dangers and challenges?
Well, as I travel throughout the region, which is something I have spent a great deal of time doing, I hear these same concerns expressed by people in all of these countries and in neighbors who are being affected by what is happening there in these Arab Spring countries. It is indeed, as you have said, a time of great dangers. But I would also like to emphasize that with any transitions, it is also a time of opportunities as well as challenges. It's a time for leaders to lead. Unfortunately, in my view, what we have seen is many people ruling or wanting to rule, but not enough people wanting to lead and to taking charge to make sure that the will of the peoples in each of these countries can be translated into strategies, policies, and programs. Let's start with Egypt. Today is a momentous day. We have heard that the military has issued a challenge to all parties, saying that they wish to follow the will of the people and that the will of the people is not being followed by the current leadership and the opposition. And they have challenged them to sit down and have a plan so that all parties can reconcile in one way or another, and within 24 hours of the time that I'm talking now. So when I talk about Egypt, I'm already talking about an Egypt not only in a long-term transition, but in a very short-term transition. And I look forward to hearing from others about what is going on. But what is clear to me about Egypt, and I was there at the time when Mubarak was overthrown, and I saw the excitement in the faces of young people and old people and people of all ages. It was a time when they understood what they were leaving behind, and they were very grateful for this opportunity to separate themselves from a past that they felt was no longer relevant to their needs. But they also had expectations for the future that have not been fulfilled. They all felt that change would bring a better quality of life. That has not happened. The economy of Egypt has suffered greatly, and so have so many people, particularly young people. The economic crisis is deepening, and even with a short-term transition, unless that transition is focused squarely on addressing the economic crisis that is facing Egypt, that transition will fail as well. So it's not simply about where Egypt is going socially or politically. It is how Egypt will struggle to face its economic problems. So, in my view, again, this is a time of great dangers. No one wants to see a military takeover. No one wants to return to the past. They want to chart a new future, an inclusive future that will bring hope and opportunity to all Egyptians. That's possible, but unlikely in the short term. And it will require leaders to emerge who are not only willing to lead their people, but to lead their people with a view towards all of Egypt and all Egyptians. And they also have to be prepared to present a vision that everyone will accept, that everyone will see brings more opportunities for them. So as I look at this year, the transition that started 2 years ago will continue, and probably continue for decades. But for now, the danger is that the immediate problems that are mainly economic, if they are not addressed, it may well turn out that a transition government is required simply to address those issues and put aside the longer-term important issues of what is the relationship between the ruler and the ruled, what type of society does Egypt want, what type of economy does Egypt want. So in the case of Egypt, perhaps arguably the most strategic country in the region, not only for those living in the region, but those outside the region, these are fundamental issues. I also believe that my country, as well as others, all want Egypt to succeed. No one wants Egypt to fail. We all want to be helpful and supportive, but only the Egyptian people and their leaders can chart that course so that we can, in fact, be helpful. Now, in the case of Libya, we have seen an odious government overthrown, but it is a country with few institutions, unlike Egypt, few leaders who have experience, and in fact, if you're talking about even basic organizations like ministries, they do not exist. So Libya has a real disadvantage on the one hand in terms of not having institutions to build, but on the other hand they have what I believe is the best opportunity to create the society they want from scratch. Once again, this requires strong leadership, which I don't see that is there. And once again, it requires the commitment of all the people, whether it's the tribes or the people from the different regions, to look to those leaders to carry out the transformation that fits what is best for Libya. Now, as a result of the chaos in Libya, we saw this spread throughout the Sahel region, so that from Mauritania to Sudan, the region has been destabilized. In order to put this all back, we need a strong Libya with secure borders, on the one hand. But we also need to see countries in the region step up, as well as those outside the region, to follow up what was done in Mali, to try to stabilize the situation first. And number two is to give the people of the Sahel the same things that the people of Libya and Egypt want, which is economic opportunity, fair representation, an elimination of corruption, and strong management of their societies, their politics, and their economy. Now, in the case of Algeria, this is a change of leadership. A new generation is coming in. At the same time, they have been facing a war that has gone on for decades. So in the case of Algeria, we are only beginning to see a transition that will start soon, and where it will go will be up to the Algerians to decide. Once again, I believe that Algeria has many friends throughout the world who will be supportive and helpful. So the opportunities are there, but so are the crises and the dangers. No one from the outside wants to intervene. That is very clear to me. But I do see that people on the outside are willing to help. But once again, who will be the leadership of the new Algeria? This is something that none of us can tell who will be the young man or young woman or whomever or older person who will emerge that can build consensus and chart a vision for their countries. To me, that's the key point. Lack of leaders, too many rulers. When the leaders emerge, we will then have a better idea of, the people will have a better idea of where they're going, and outside countries like my own will also be able to help so they can translate those visions into real progress.
You have detailed a number of dangers and challenges across this region. In your view, what is the best approach to understanding what is happening in North Africa? And how is the U.S. shaping its policy to deal with this?
The best approach is clearly to understand first the historical roots of what's happening and what these countries have, how they have developed ever since the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, roughly 100 years ago. It's been 100 years of searching for identities, searching for what kind of government they want, searching for what kind of future that they want. There have been many experiments throughout the region, and to be fair, there has been, in fact, an enormous stability in the region, strangely enough, so that none of the borders in this region have changed. While borders have changed in other parts of Africa, and even in Europe, and elsewhere in the world. But these borders so far have held. So the people of the region have, in fact, achieved a certain measure of stability. But it was very clear that that stability, which most people on the outside felt is all that they wanted, was not all that they wanted. In fact, the new generation is craving real, fundamental change that will, in fact, give voice to the people, that will, in fact, allow them to choose an economic path so that when they are educated and they leave college, that they can have successful careers. There are no answers to these questions right now on how to do this. They have not answered it themselves. They knew what they wanted freedom from. Freedom from corruption, freedom from economic exploitation, freedom from the ability to speak and to have their voices heard. But they're not quite sure what they want freedom for. What is it for? What type of relationship between those who govern and those who are governed? Freedom for what type of economic system? Where will Islam fit into the politics, the economics, and the society? Where will they be 50 years from now? When I ask people in the region, they cannot answer that question. But until they chart a path, they will be struggling through many ups and downs, twists and turns, that will make it difficult for them, especially the young people, to be able to have the kind of life that they have as a very general vision. But they need to take that vision and translate that into clear goals for their government and for themselves.
Do regional organizations have a role to play in this?
I firmly believe, and I've spoken about this before, that the regional organizations that currently exist were for another era. They were primarily established to, as much as possible, unify the ranks of the countries, on the one hand, and provide a voice for those countries to the world. But they were not organizations, speaking very frankly, that were problem solvers. They were not organizations that helped countries move forward. They were organizations that were very disorganized, and in speaking with consensus, they spoke in many cases for no one. Now each country is trying to chart its own course. But there is a common need, especially in the area of economics. I have advocated in the past the creation of a new institution that I call MedTide. Med stands, of course, for the Mediterranean. And Tide stands for trade, investment, development, and then not just energy, and not just education, but also employment. Think of what this institution could do for the entire region, whether it is North Africa, but also Southern Europe, which is suffering itself. The Mediterranean is blessed by God with enormous resources and with a wonderful climate. And as the word Mediterranean means, it's the center of the earth. It has a rich history and, I believe, a promising future. Together, joining all sides of the Mediterranean, I believe they can address common interests. And we're talking about truly common interests when we talk about trade, investment, development, education, energy, and employment. I believe this institution, whether it is a freestanding institution or it is fit into other institutions who, in fact, should support it, is exactly what is needed to clarify the vision of each of these countries. They cannot do it on their own. They cannot. The world is too interdependent today. But together, as a unit, they will be a powerful force to help themselves, but also allow others to help them. So I continue to advocate the establishment of this new organization because, in my view, the existing institutions and organizations have all failed to adjust themselves to the new realities, the new requirement, the new challenges, and the new dangers of the Arab Springs that are happening now.
So now for the tough question. What is your vision of North Africa in 2020?
My vision of North Africa in 2020 is a vision of a region that rightly takes its place, in fact, as the center of the world, as a marketplace of ideas, a marketplace of opportunities where East meets West. This is what the Mediterranean is. It is an area where East meets West. We see the dynamic economic engines of growth in the East, focusing not just on China and India, but Southeast Asia and the Indian Ocean region, all the way to the Gulf, where we see economic potential, where we see countries that are developing and that have surplus investment to put in Africa, and also particularly North Africa. The opportunities are there, but they have to be grasped. And I could see in 2020 a very dynamic North Africa that is the nexus between Europe and Asia. And in that respect, the opportunities in terms of financial services, in terms of air transport, in terms of tourism, which can employ so many people, is enormous. So I see a vision of a region that, in fact, provides all those opportunities for the youth that they're craving for right now.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us. If you would have any comments or questions that you would like featured in a follow-up session of the Ramadan Dialogues, please feel free to message us on our Twitter feed, Facebook, or in an email on the following slide. Thank you very much.